The morning bell rang through the hallways of Riverside Middle School. 12-year-old Lily walked through the front doors for the very first time. Her stomach churned with nervous energy as she clutched the straps of her backpack, a faded blue one that had belonged to her older cousin years ago. It still worked fine. Even if the zipper sometimes got stuck and one of the pockets had a small tear she'd carefully stitched up with thread that didn't quite match. Everything about this school felt different from her old one. The floors were polished and shiny. The lockers looked new, not covered in dents and peeling paint. Through the windows, she could see a perfectly maintained soccer field and tennis courts that actually had nets. At her previous school across town, they'd played soccer on a patch of dirt and grass that turned to mud whenever it rained. Lily adjusted her jacket, trying not to think about how it was just a bit too short in the sleeves now. She'd grown over the summer, and her mom kept saying they'd go shopping for new clothes soon, but soon never seemed to come. There was always something more important to pay for. The rent, the electric bill, the car repair that couldn't wait. Her mom worked 2 jobs now, which was actually why they'd moved to this side of town in the first place. The new apartment was smaller, but it was closer to her mom's main job at the hospital, which meant less money spent on gas. The office lady had been kind when Lily checked in, giving her a schedule and a map of the school. Third period was music class, room 142. Lily had always loved music, though she'd never mentioned it to anyone at her old school. It felt like something private, something just for her. When third period finally came, Lily found room 142 at the end of a long hallway. Through the small window in the door, she could see other kids already sitting down, chatting and laughing with each other. They all seemed to know each other. Of course they did. They'd probably been going to school together since kindergarten. She pushed open the door and stepped inside. The room was bigger than she expected, with risers along one wall where chairs were arranged in rows. But what caught her attention immediately was the piano. A gorgeous black grand piano sat in the corner near the windows. Its surface so shiny she could almost see her reflection in it. She'd never been this close to a real grand piano before. "You must be our new student," a voice said, making her jump. A tall man with graying hair and glasses perched on his nose stood near the teacher's desk, holding a clipboard. He wore a button-up shirt and a tie, and he looked at her with the kind of expression someone might give a stain on their carpet. "Lily Rodriguez, correct?" "Yes, sir," Lily said quietly, her voice barely carrying across the room. "Well, find a seat. Anywhere in the back is fine." He waved his hand dismissively and turned back to his clipboard. Lily walked up the risers to the back row, feeling every pair of eyes following her. She heard whispers, but couldn't make out the words. A girl with perfectly straightened blonde hair leaned over to her friend, and they both glanced at Lily before giggling. Lily's face grew hot as she slid into an empty seat and pulled out her notebook. The teacher, Mr. Peterson, began the class by introducing himself, though it was clearly just for Lily's benefit. Everyone else already knew him. He'd been teaching at Riverside for 15 years, he said with pride. He'd studied music at a prestigious university, and several of his former students had gone on to become professional musicians. "Music," Mr. Peterson announced, walking to the center of the room with his hands clasped behind his back, "is not something just anyone can master. It requires discipline, natural talent, and proper training from a young age. Some people have it, and frankly, most people don't." Lily wrote notes in her notebook, trying to focus on his words rather than the uncomfortable feeling of being the outsider. She noticed that most of the other students weren't taking notes at all. A boy in the front row was doodling on his paper. 2 girls were passing notes back and forth, barely paying attention. "This semester," Mr. Peterson continued, "we'll be focusing on classical piano. Now, I know many of you have been taking private lessons for years." He smiled at a few students in the front rows who nodded. "For those of you who haven't had that advantage, well, you'll do your best to keep up." That last comment seemed pointed, and Lily couldn't shake the feeling it was directed at her. Even though Mr. Peterson wasn't looking her way, he spent the next 20 minutes talking about the history of piano music, dropping names of composers and pieces that Lily actually recognized. Beethoven, Mozart, Chopin. Her heart beat a little faster at each name, memories flooding back, but she kept her expression neutral, her eyes on her notebook. The piano, Mr. Peterson said, running his hand lovingly along the top of the grand piano, is perhaps the most difficult instrument to master. It requires both hands to work independently, strong muscle memory, understanding of complex musical theory, and years of dedicated practice. Most people who attempt to learn piano give up within the first year. It's simply too challenging. He looked around the room with an expression that suggested he was the only one who truly understood this challenge. Next week, we'll begin with basic scales and exercises. I'll be evaluating each of you individually. I expect those with training to demonstrate what you've learned, and those without. He paused, shrugging. Well, we'll see where you're starting from. The class dragged on. Mr. Peterson showed them a video of a famous pianist performing at a concert hall, pointing out techniques and hand positions. Lily watched, absorbed, while around her, other students whispered or stared at their phones when Mr. Peterson's back was turned. When the bell finally rang, everyone grabbed their things and rushed for the door. Lily took her time, carefully putting away her notebook and zipping up her backpack. She was the last one out, and as she reached the door, Mr. Peterson called out, "Miss Rodriguez." She turned. "Yes, sir." He was organizing papers on his desk, not looking at her. "I hope you'll take this class seriously, even if you don't have a musical background. Everyone can learn something, even if they're starting from zero." "Yes, sir," Lily said again, her throat tight. She walked out into the hallway, where groups of students clustered around lockers, all talking and laughing. Nobody looked at her. Nobody said hello. She was invisible here, just the new girl from the poor side of town, the one who didn't belong. But as she walked to her next class, Lily thought about the piano in room 142, that beautiful grand piano. And she thought about what Mr. Peterson had said about natural talent, proper training, and years of practice. He had no idea. None of them did. A small smile crossed her face. Let them think what they wanted. Let them assume. She'd learned a long time ago that sometimes being underestimated was its own kind of advantage. People never saw you coming. Next week couldn't come fast enough. 2 weeks had passed since Lily's first day at Riverside Middle School, and she still felt like an outsider. She'd learned to navigate the hallways without getting lost, figured out which bathroom was least crowded, and discovered that the library was the best place to spend lunch when sitting. Alone in the cafeteria felt too uncomfortable. Music class had become the highlight of her week, though not for reasons anyone would guess. She sat in the back row, took careful notes, and watched Mr. Peterson with quiet attention. He'd spent these 2 weeks lecturing about music theory, showing videos, and building up to what he called the practical portion of the semester. Today was that day. Lily walked into room 142 and immediately noticed the energy was different. Students were chattering more than usual, a mix of excitement and nervousness in the air. The grand piano seemed to command even more attention than before, sitting there like it was waiting for something. "All right, settle down," Mr. Peterson said, clapping his hands together. He was wearing a better tie than usual, and his shoes were freshly polished. "Today, as I mentioned last class, we begin our practical evaluations. Each of you will demonstrate your current skill level on the piano." A few hands shot up immediately. A girl named Ashley in the front row was practically bouncing in her seat. "Mr. Peterson, can I go first?" "Eager as always, Miss Chen," he said with an approving smile. "Yes, come on up and show us what you've learned." Ashley walked confidently to the piano and sat down with perfect posture. She placed her hands on the keys and began playing a Mozart piece. It was good, technically sound, though a bit mechanical. When she finished, Mr. Peterson nodded approvingly. "Excellent work. Your private instructor is clearly worth every penny your parents spend. I can hear the training." He made notes on his clipboard. "Though perhaps work on adding more emotional expression. You're hitting all the right notes, but music is about feeling, not just precision." Ashley beamed anyway and returned to her seat while her friends whispered congratulations. One by one, students went up to play. Most had clearly taken lessons. They played scales, simple classical pieces, exercises that demonstrated basic competence. Mr. Peterson offered corrections in a patient, encouraging tone. He'd pause their playing to point out finger positions, compliment their progress, or suggest areas for improvement. Very good. Very good, he'd say. I can see the hard work you've put in. Lily watched it all from the back row, her hands folded on her desk. Each student who played was from a family with money, she realized. They talked about their private instructors, their piano teachers who came to their houses, the recitals they'd performed in. This was their world. A world where having a grand piano in your living room was normal, where weekly lessons were just another item on a busy schedule packed with soccer practice and debate club. The class was winding down when Mr. Peterson's eyes swept the room and landed on Lily. She felt her stomach drop. Please no, she thought. Not today, Miss Rodriguez, he said, and the room went quiet. You haven't volunteered yet. I'm fine just watching today, sir, Lily said softly. Nonsense, Mr. Peterson said, his tone shifting to something else. Something with an edge to it. This is a participation grade, and everyone must participate. Come on up, Lily. Didn't move. Her hands gripped the edge of her desk. Miss Rodriguez, I don't have all day. His voice was louder now, and students were turning to stare. In my classroom, everyone takes their turn. Fair is fair. A boy near the front snickered. Someone whispered something Lily couldn't quite hear, but she caught the words probably never and afford lessons. Her face burned hot. Mr. Peterson walked closer to her row, his arms crossed. Come now, even if you've never touched a piano before, you can try a simple scale. We're all learning here. No one will judge you. But the way he said it, the slight smirk on his face, made it clear that wasn't true at all. The silence in the room was suffocating. Lily could feel everyone's eyes on her. She thought about refusing, about just sitting there until he gave up. But that would only make tomorrow worse, and the day after that. Slowly, she stood up. Her legs felt shaky as she walked down the risers toward the piano. The whispers started immediately behind her. This is going to be painful to watch, someone muttered. At $10 says she doesn't know where middle C is, another voice said. Followed by quiet laughter, Mr. Peterson stepped aside with an exaggerated gesture of invitation, like he was presenting her with a stage. The piano is all yours, Miss Rodriguez. Show us what you can do. Or, well, what you can't do, as the case may be. Few students laughed at that. Lily reached the piano bench and stood there for a moment, her hand resting on the smooth wood. The instrument was even more beautiful up close. She could see the grain in the wood, the perfect alignment of the keys. Black and white stretching out before her, she sat down slowly, adjusting the bench. Her hands were trembling slightly as she held them above the keys. The trembling wasn't from fear, though. It was from holding back, from years of keeping quiet, from weeks of being invisible. Behind her, she heard Mr. Peterson sigh impatiently. Any time now? Just play whatever you can manage. Even Twinkle Twinkle Little Star would be a start. Ashley whispered to her friend, not bothering to keep her voice down. My little sister plays better than this is going to be, and she's only 6. Lily closed her eyes and took a deep breath. In her mind, she was back in the tiny apartment she'd lived in until 2 months ago. She could see her grandmother sitting beside her at the old electric keyboard they'd borrowed from a neighbor. The one with 2 broken keys and a volume dial that didn't work right. She could hear her grandmother's voice, soft and warm, speaking in a mix of English and Spanish. Music is not about the instrument, Mia. Her grandmother had told her 1,000 times. It's about what you carry in here. She'd tap Lily's chest, right over her heart. The piano is just wood and wire. You are the music. Her grandmother had been a concert pianist in Mexico. Before she'd fled to the United States with nothing but a suitcase and memories, she'd never owned another piano, couldn't afford one. But she'd taught Lily everything she knew, using that borrowed keyboard, library books with yellowed pages, and endless patience. Lily opened her eyes and looked at the keys before her. Her hands stopped trembling. They settled onto the keys with a certainty that felt like coming home. The room was completely silent now, waiting for the disaster. Mr. Peterson tapped his pen against his clipboard. Someone coughed, and then Lily began to play. The first notes rang out clear and pure. The change in the room was instant. The piece she'd chosen was Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major. one of the most beautiful and technically challenging pieces in the classical repertoire. Her fingers moved across the keys like water, flowing from note to note with effortless grace. The melody soared through the room, delicate and powerful at once. Her left hand carried the deep, rolling bass line, while her right hand danced through the intricate melody, each note perfectly placed, perfectly timed. The dynamics shifted from whisper-soft to rich and full, her hands knowing exactly how much pressure to apply, exactly when to pull back. Behind her, someone gasped. Lily kept playing. Her eyes closed again now, lost in the music. This was the piece her grandmother had taught her last. The one they'd worked on for months, until every measure was perfect. She could feel her grandmother there with her, guiding her, encouraging her. The music swelled and dipped, told a story without words. For minutes that felt like both an eternity and an instant. When she played the final chord, letting it ring out until the sound faded to nothing. Silence hung in the air. Lily opened her eyes and lifted her hands from the keys. She turned slowly on the bench to face the class. Every single student was staring at her with their mouths open. Mr. Peterson's clipboard had slipped from his hands and clattered to the floor. His face had gone pale, then red, then pale again. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed, and then from the back row, one person started clapping. The single clap echoed through the stunned silence of room 142. Then another person joined in, and another. Within seconds, the entire class erupted into thunderous applause. Students jumped to their feet, some of them shouting. A boy in the middle row let out a whistle. Lily sat frozen on the piano bench, her hands still hovering above the keys. She hadn't expected this. She'd been prepared for more mockery, more whispers, maybe some grudging acknowledgement. But not this. Oh my God. Ashley shouted from the front row, her earlier smugness completely gone. That was insane. How did you do that? That was better than my teacher plays. Another student called out. The applause continued. And Lily felt her face growing hot again, but this time for a completely different reason. She stood up slowly, unsure what to do with her hands, where to look. The attention felt overwhelming after weeks of being invisible. Through the noise and excitement, she looked at Mr. Peterson. He stood exactly where he'd been when she started playing, but he looked like a completely different person. His face had gone through several shades of red and was now settling on a blotchy pink. His mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. The clipboard he'd dropped still lay on the floor by his feet. Everyone, settle down. He finally managed to say, but his voice cracked slightly. The students slowly quieted, though they were still buzzing with energy. That was quite unexpected. Lily walked back toward her seat in the back row, but before she could get there, several students stopped her. A girl named Rachel, who'd never spoken to her before, grabbed her arm. Wait, you have to tell us. Where did you learn to play like that? Who's your teacher? Lily hesitated, her throat tight. I don't have a teacher. Not anymore. What do you mean? Another student asked. A small crowd had formed around her now. Mr. Peterson cleared his throat loudly. Miss Rodriguez, I think we'd all benefit from hearing about your musical background. That performance was, he paused, seeming to struggle with the words, exceptionally advanced. That was Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major, a piece that typically takes pianists years to master. The way he said it made it sound like an accusation rather than a compliment. Lily stood there, feeling trapped between the piano and her classmates, all of them staring at her with new eyes. These were the same kids who'd whispered about her clothes, who'd looked right through her in the hallways, who'd laughed when Mr. Peterson called her up to play. My grandmother taught me, Lily said quietly. The room went even more silent, everyone straining to hear. She spoke louder, her voice gaining strength. She was a concert pianist in Mexico. She performed in theaters and on television when she was younger. But she had to leave everything behind when she came to America. Is she still teaching you? Rachel asked, genuine curiosity in her voice. Lily shook her head and felt the familiar ache in her chest. She passed away last year. Cancer. A few students made sympathetic sounds. Ashley's expression softened completely. I'm so sorry, Mr. Peterson said, though he still looked unsettled. But surely you had formal training as well. Private lessons? A music school? No, sir. Lily met his eyes directly for the first time. Just my grandmother, a borrowed keyboard that was missing 2 keys. And whatever sheet music we could find at the library or print, out when we had internet access. Classroom was so quiet you could hear the clock ticking on the wall. Learn to play like that on a broken keyboard? A boy named Tyler said, disbelief clear in his voice. My parents spent like $30,000 on the piano in our living room, and I can't play half that well. It's not about the instrument, Lily said, repeating her grandmother's words. My grandmother used to say the piano is just wood and wire. The music comes from somewhere else. Mr. Peterson picked up his clipboard from the floor, his movements stiff and awkward. Yes, well, that's quite a philosophy. He busied himself with shuffling papers, avoiding eye contact with everyone. Miss Rodriguez, your technical skill is undeniable. Your interpretation was mature and nuanced. The dynamics were excellent, and your finger work was precise. He paused, and Lily could tell the next words were physically painful for him to say. It was the best performance I've heard in this classroom in my 15 years of teaching here. The students erupted again, this time with even more energy. Several people actually cheered. Ashley turned to her friend and said loudly enough for everyone to hear, I've been taking lessons since I was 4 years old, and I could never play like that. Never. The point is, Mr. Peterson said, raising his voice over the commotion, Miss Rodriguez clearly has exceptional natural talent combined with what must have been rigorous training, even if unconventional. This is what I mean when I talk about dedication and discipline. But Lily noticed he didn't apologize for what he'd said earlier. He didn't acknowledge that he'd tried to humiliate her, that he'd assumed she knew nothing, that he'd used her as an example of what not to be. The bell rang, signaling the end of class. Students gathered their things, but moved slowly, many of them still trying to talk to Lily. Rachel walked beside her as they headed toward the door. Hey, do you eat lunch in the cafeteria? Rachel asked. You should sit with us today. I want to hear more about your grandmother. She sounds amazing. Lily felt something unfamiliar flutter in her chest. Hope, maybe. I usually go to the library. Well, not today. Come on, I insist. Rachel linked her arm through Lily's like they'd been friends forever. Ashley, Tyler, come on. Lily's sitting with us at lunch. As they walked out into the hallway. Lily glanced back at room 142. Mr. Peterson stood alone by his desk, staring at the piano with an expression she couldn't quite read. Confusion, maybe. Or shame. The cafeteria was loud and crowded, but Rachel led them to a table by the windows where her usual group sat. Lily recognized most of them from music class. They made room for her immediately, pushing trays aside and pulling up an extra chair. Play it again, Tyler said as she sat down. I need to hear that piece again. Do you know any other Chopin? Lily smiled, a real smile this time. I know a few others. My grandmother loved Chopin. She said he understood sadness and hope at the same time. That's beautiful, Ashley said, and she sounded like she meant it. I've been playing piano for 8 years and my teacher never talks about music like that. It's always just technique and theory and practicing scales. Scales are important, Lily said. My grandmother made me practice them every single day, even when I complained. But she always said scales are like learning words, so you can eventually write poetry. The group fell quiet for a moment. Absorbing that? Her grandmother sounds like she was an incredible person, Rachel said softly. She was. Lily felt tears prick at her eyes, but blinked them away. She gave up everything when she left Mexico. Her career, her piano, her whole life. But she never gave up music. She said it was the one thing no one could take from her. Tyler leaned forward, his elbows on the table. Can I ask you something? When Mr. Peterson was being so rude earlier, making you go up there when you didn't want to, weren't you angry? Lily thought about it. I was embarrassed, hurt, but my grandmother used to tell me that people who make assumptions about you are actually just showing you who they are. She'd say, let your actions speak louder than their words. That's exactly what you did, Ashley said. You let your playing speak for itself. And it said everything. As lunch period continued, more students stopped by their table. Word had spread fast through the school about what happened in music class. By the end of lunch, Lily had been asked to play at the upcoming school assembly, invited to join the school's talent show committee, and had 3 different people ask if she'd consider giving them piano lessons. The quiet girl in the back row who nobody noticed had become someone everyone wanted to know. But the strange thing was, Lily realized she was still the same person she'd been that morning. She hadn't changed. The only thing that changed was that now people could see her. When the lunch bell rang, and everyone headed to their next classes, Rachel walked with Lily toward the science wing. "I'm really glad you came to Riverside," Rachel said. "I know it probably hasn't been easy being new and everything, but I hope you know you have friends here now." Lily smiled. "Thank you. That means a lot." As she walked into her science classroom and took her seat, Lily thought about her grandmother again. She wished she could tell her about today, about Mr. Peterson's face, about the applause, about everything. Her grandmother would have laughed and probably said something wise about how the truth always finds a way to surface. And then Lily remembered something her grandmother had told her in one of their last conversations before she got too sick to talk much. "When you play Mia, I'm there with you. Every note, every song. Music doesn't die. It lives forever." Lily touched the simple bracelet on her wrist, the last gift her grandmother had given her, and smiled. By the next morning, everyone at Riverside Middle School knew about Lily Rodriguez and what had happened in music class. She walked through the hallways and heard whispers that were different from before. Instead of judging her worn jacket or her discount store sneakers, students were talking about the piano performance. Some of them smiled at her. A few even said hello. It felt surreal in first period math. A girl named Kennedy, who'd never spoken to her before, turned around in her seat. "Hey, is it true you learned piano from your grandmother? That's so cool. My piano teacher is super strict and boring." During passing period, 2 8th graders stopped her in the hallway. "You're the girl who plays piano, right? That's awesome. Are you going to play at the winter concert?" Lily wasn't sure how to handle the attention. Part of her wanted to shrink back into invisibility, but another part of her, a part that sounded a lot like her grandmother's voice, told her to stand tall. When 3rd period came and she walked into room 142, the energy was different again. Several students called out greetings to her. Tyler waved her over to sit with his group instead of in the back row. Even the piano itself seemed to look at her differently, like it was waiting for her. Mr. Peterson stood at the front of the classroom, his posture rigid. He'd clearly spent the evening thinking about what had happened, because when the bell rang and class officially started, he cleared his throat in a way that demanded attention. "Before we begin today's lesson," he said, his voice formal and stiff, "I need to address what occurred yesterday." He paused, adjusting his glasses. "Miss Rodriguez demonstrated an exceptional level of musical ability that I had not anticipated. I made certain assumptions based on incomplete information, and that was unprofessional of me." The classroom was silent. Everyone watched him, waiting. However, he continued, and Lily's stomach sank at that word. "This does not change the fundamental principles of musical education. Natural talent is valuable, but structured training and proper technique are essential for true mastery. What we witnessed yesterday was impressive, but raw talent without refinement can only take one so far." Lily felt her face flush. He was doing it again, just in a different way, dismissing what her grandmother had taught her, suggesting it wasn't good enough because it hadn't come from an expensive music school. Tyler raised his hand. "Mr. Peterson, with all due respect, what Lily played yesterday wasn't raw. It was perfect. Better than perfect. That's subjective," Mr. Peterson replied quickly. "Technical perfection and artistic interpretation are 2 different things." "But you said yourself it was the best performance you'd heard in 15 years, Ashley pointed out, her voice sharp. Mr. Peterson's jaw tightened. "Yes, well, I may have been caught up in the moment. The point is, class, we all need to continue working on fundamentals. Now let's move on to today's lesson." But something had shifted in the room. The students who had always hung on Mr. Peterson's every word who nodded along with his lectures about proper training and pedigree, were looking at him differently now. Lily could see doubt in their faces. The lesson dragged on, but Lily's mind was elsewhere. She thought about her grandmother, about all those hours spent at the borrowed keyboard in their cramped apartment. Her grandmother never had fancy degrees framed on the wall or a prestigious university on her resume. What she had was a lifetime of living and breathing music, of understanding it in her bones. After class, Lily was gathering her things when she heard someone call her name from the doorway. She looked up and saw a woman she didn't recognize, someone older than Mr. Peterson, with kind eyes and gray hair pulled back in a loose bun. "Lily Rodriguez?" the woman asked, stepping into the classroom. "Yes, ma'am. I'm Mrs. Chen. I teach music at the high school, just next door." She smiled warmly. "I heard about your performance yesterday from at least 5 different students, and I had to come meet you myself." Mr. Peterson, who was erasing the whiteboard, turned around quickly. "Mrs. Chen, what brings you to the middle school?" "You actually, Tom," Mrs. Chen said pleasantly. But there was something in her tone that suggested she wasn't entirely pleased. "Or rather, the student you have here. May I speak with Lily for a moment?" "She needs to get to her next class," Mr. Peterson said. "I'll write her a pass." Mrs. Chen's smile didn't waver, but her voice was firm. They stepped into the hallway, and Mrs. Chen gestured for Lily to walk with her. They moved away from the classroom door, out of earshot. "Lily, I'm going to be direct with you," Mrs. Chen said. "What you played yesterday, the Chopin Nocturne, is not an easy piece. I've been teaching for 30 years, and I've had maybe 3 students who could perform it at the level you did. How long have you been playing?" "Since I was 5, Lily said. "My grandmother started teaching me as soon as my hands were big enough to reach the keys properly." "And your grandmother? She was professionally trained?" Lily nodded. "She went to a conservatory in Mexico City. She performed all over the country before she came here." Mrs. Chen's eyes lit up. "I thought I heard something special in your playing. There's a depth there that you can't learn from just technique. It's soul. It's lived experience coming through the music." She paused. "Lily, I want to help you. Have you heard of the Regional Youth Music Program?" Lily shook her head. "It's a scholarship program for talented young musicians. It provides free lessons with professional instructors, access to practice rooms with quality instruments, and opportunities to perform in real concerts. I think you'd be a perfect candidate." Mrs. Chen pulled a business card from her purse. "This has my email and phone number. I want you to apply, and I'd like to write you a recommendation letter." Lily stared at the card in her hand. "I don't know what to say." "Say yes," Mrs. Chen said with a warm smile. "Your grandmother gave you an incredible foundation. Let's build on it. You deserve every opportunity, Lily." "But what about Mr. Peterson? He said I need proper training, that what I have isn't enough." Mrs. Chen's expression hardened slightly. "Tom Peterson is a competent teacher, but he's set in his ways. He believes the only valid path to music is through expensive private schools and elite training programs. But some of the greatest musicians in history came from humble beginnings and learned from family members or self-taught themselves." She placed a gentle hand on Lily's shoulder. "Your grandmother's teaching is worth more than any fancy conservatory, because she didn't just teach you to play notes. She taught you to feel them." Lily felt tears threatening again. "Thank you, Mrs. Chen." "Thank your grandmother," Mrs. Chen said. "She's the one who gave you this gift. I'm just helping you unwrap it." That evening, Lily sat at the small kitchen table in their apartment while her mother made dinner. She told her everything that had happened over the past 2 days. The words tumbling out faster and faster, her mother listened quietly, stirring a pot of soup on the stove. When Lily finished, her mother wiped her eyes with the corner of her apron. "Mia, your abuela would be so proud of you," her mother said, her voice thick with emotion. "She always knew you had something special. She used to tell me, that girl has music in her soul, not just her fingers." "Do you think I should apply for the program Mrs. Chen told me about?" Lily asked. Her mother sat down across from her at the table. "Do you want to?" Lily thought about it. About her grandmother's hands guiding hers over the keys. About the years of practice, the borrowed keyboard, the library books. About music class and Mr. Peterson's assumptions. about the way the piano had felt under her fingers yesterday, like coming home. Yes, she said firmly. I want to keep playing. I want to get better. I want to make Abuela proud. Then you apply, her mother said. We'll figure out the rest. That night, Lily sat on her bed with her laptop, filling out the application for the regional youth music program. The questions asked about her training, her experience, her goals. In the section that asked about her musical background, she wrote about her grandmother. She wrote about the borrowed keyboard, the library books, the tiny apartment where they'd spent countless hours together. She wrote about what music meant to her, how it was a connection to her heritage, to her grandmother's memory, to something bigger than herself. When she finished, she attached the application to an email to Mrs. Chen, took a deep breath, and hit send. The next day in music class, Mr. Peterson announced they'd be preparing for the winter concert. He assigned pieces to various students, mostly simple arrangements appropriate for their skill levels. When he got to Lily, he hesitated. Miss Rodriguez, I think you should play a solo piece. Something that showcases your abilities. Said it like it pained him, but he said it. Tyler pumped his fist in the air. Yes. Can she play that chop-in piece again? Perhaps something different, Mr. Peterson said quickly. We want to demonstrate range. I'd like to play something my grandmother loved, Lily said, surprising herself with her boldness. Debussy's Clair de Lune. It was her favorite. Mr. Peterson nodded slowly. That's an appropriate choice. It's technically demanding, but beautiful. Very well. As class continued, Lily felt something settling inside her, a sense of purpose, of direction. Her grandmother had given her the tools, the foundation, the love of music. Now it was up to her to decide what to build with it. She looked at the piano in the corner of her room. 142, and made a silent promise. She'd play at the winter concert. She'd apply herself to the scholarship program if she got in. She'd practice and learn and grow. But most importantly, she'd never forget where she came from or who had taught her. Every note she played would carry her grandmother's spirit, her grandmother's passion, her grandmother's gift, and that was worth more than any amount of money or prestige could ever buy. 3 weeks had passed since Lily sent in her application to the regional youth music program. 3 weeks of practicing Clair de Lune every chance she got, of sitting with Rachel and her friends at lunch, of slowly becoming part of the fabric of Riverside Middle School, instead of just the new girl nobody noticed. The winter concert was scheduled for Friday evening, and the entire school buzzed with anticipation. The auditorium had been decorated with silver and blue streamers, and rows of chairs were being set up for what the principal expected to be the biggest turnout in years. Word had spread beyond the school. Parents were bringing relatives. Some people from the community had even called asking if the concert was open to the public, all because of Lily. She tried not to think about the pressure. Instead, she focused on her grandmother's voice in her head, steady and calm. The music doesn't change whether you play for one person or 1,000. You play for yourself, for the joy of it. Everything else is just noise. On Thursday afternoon, Mrs. Chen appeared at the door of room 142 during music class. She caught Lily's eye and gave a small nod. Lily's heart began to race. She knew what that nod meant. When class ended, Lily practically ran to where Mrs. Chen waited in the hallway. You got in, Mrs. Chen said, her face breaking into a huge smile. Full scholarship. They want you to start in January. Lily couldn't speak. She just stood there, feeling tears streaming down her face, not even trying to stop them. The review committee watched the video I submitted of your performance, Mrs. Chen continued. They said they haven't seen someone with your level of musical maturity in years. One of them actually called me to ask if you were really only 12 years old. I can't believe it, Lily whispered. Believe it, Mrs. Chen said firmly. You earned this, Lily. Every single note of it. That evening, Lily's mother took her out for ice cream to celebrate, something they rarely did because of the cost. They sat in the small shop near their apartment, and her mother kept wiping away happy tears. Your abuela is dancing in heaven right now, her mother said. She always believed in you, even when you were tiny and your hands could barely reach the keys. I wish she could be here tomorrow, Lily said quietly. For the concert? Her mother reached across the table and squeezed her hand. She will be Mia, in every note you play. Friday arrived cold and clear. Lily wore the nicest outfit she owned, a simple black dress that her mother had carefully ironed that morning. Her hands shook slightly as she brushed her hair, and she had to stop and take deep breaths to calm herself. At school, the day crawled by. Teachers mentioned the concert. Students wished her luck. Even people she'd never spoken to before stopped her in the hallways to tell her they'd be there in music class. Mr. Peterson ran through the final rehearsal schedule. Various students would perform their pieces, the choir would sing 3 songs, and Lily would close the concert with Claire de Lune. The finale, Mr. Peterson said, and for once his tone wasn't dismissive. Miss Rodriguez, you'll be the last performance of the evening. No pressure. He almost smiled when he said it. Tyler leaned over and whispered, "You're going to kill it. Everyone's going to lose their minds." That evening, the auditorium filled up fast. Lily peeked through the stage curtains and saw rows and rows of people. The first few rows were packed with students from school. Behind them sat parents, teachers, and community members. She spotted her mother in the 3rd row, sitting with Mrs. Chen. Her mother saw her peeking and waved, blowing her a kiss. The concert began. A 6th grader played a simple violin piece. The jazz band performed. The choir sang holiday songs that got the audience clapping along. Each performance was met with warm applause. Lily watched from backstage, her heart pounding harder with each act. Ashley performed a Mozart piece on the piano that was technically good, just like in class. The audience clapped politely. A group of 8th graders did a percussion ensemble that was energetic and fun. And then, Mr. Peterson walked onto the stage to introduce the final performance. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said into the microphone, his voice carrying through the packed auditorium. "Tonight's closing performance is something special. Earlier this semester, I had the privilege of discovering an extraordinary talent right here at Riverside Middle School." Lily noticed he said, discovering as if he'd found her. Not that he'd tried to humiliate her. She took another deep breath. This student learned piano not from expensive private lessons or elite music schools, but from her grandmother, a concert pianist who fled Mexico and brought nothing with her except her love of music. What you're about to hear is the result of dedication, passion, and the kind of teaching that comes from the heart. Please welcome 7th grader Lily Rodriguez performing Debussy's Claire de Lune. The applause started before Lily even walked onto the stage. She stepped out from behind the curtain, and the lights were bright and warm. She walked to the piano, same grand piano from room 142 that had been moved to the stage for the concert. She sat down, adjusted the bench, and placed her hands on the keys. The auditorium fell completely silent. Somewhere in that silence, she felt her grandmother's presence. As real as the piano beneath her fingers, Lily closed her eyes and began to play. The opening notes of Claire de Lune floated through the auditorium like moonlight on water, soft and shimmering. The piece was gentler than the Chopin she'd played in class, but no less complex. It required incredible control, the ability to make the piano whisper one moment and sing the next. Her fingers moved across the keys with the grace her grandmother had spent years teaching her. The melody rose and fell like waves, each phrase building on the last. She could feel every person in that auditorium holding their breath, swept up in the music. This was the piece her grandmother had played at her final concert in Mexico. The night before everything changed. Her grandmother had told her about that performance so many times. The beautiful theater, the audience in their finest clothes, the way the music had filled every corner of the room. "I played for everyone I'd ever loved," her grandmother had said. "For my mother who'd passed, for my father who taught me my first scales, for all the moments of beauty I'd experienced in my life. Music is how we say the things words can't express." Lily played for her grandmother now. For every sacrifice she'd made, for every hour spent teaching at that borrowed keyboard, for every word of encouragement and every gentle correction. She played for her mother, working 2 jobs to give her a better life. She played for herself. For the girl who'd walked into Riverside scared and invisible, the music swelled to its emotional peak, then gently descended back to the quiet, shimmering quality of the opening. Lily played the final notes, letting them fade naturally, the pedal sustaining the sound until it disappeared into silence. For a moment, nobody moved. The auditorium was so quiet you could hear someone shift in their seat 3 rows back. Then the place erupted. The audience jumped to their feet as one, applauding and cheering. Lily opened her eyes, stunned by the noise. People were wiping tears from their faces. Her mother was crying openly. Mrs. Chen was beaming. Even Mr. Peterson, standing in the wings, was clapping, and his expression had changed into something like respect. Lily stood and took a bow, and the applause got even louder. Students were whistling and shouting her name. She bowed again, her own tears flowing freely now, and she didn't care who saw. As she walked off the stage, Rachel ran up and hugged her. "That was the most beautiful thing I've ever heard," she said. Tyler and Ashley and a dozen other students crowded around, all talking at once. But Lily's eyes found her mother in the crowd. They looked at each other across the auditorium, and no words were needed. Her mother pressed her hand to her heart, then pointed up toward heaven. Lily nodded. She understood. Her grandmother had been there, in every note. 2 months later, Lily stood in a real practice room at the regional youth music program, working with her new instructor, a patient woman named Miss Catherine who'd performed with symphonies across the country. But Miss Catherine always asked Lily about her grandmother, about what she'd taught her, about her philosophy of music. "Your grandmother understood something that many trained musicians forget," Miss Catherine said one day. "Technique serves the music. The music doesn't serve the technique. Never lose that." Lily visited Riverside Middle School sometimes, helping younger students in the music program. Mr. Peterson had asked her to be a teacher's assistant, and while things were still a bit awkward between them, he'd changed. He talked less about expensive training and more about passion. He told new students about Lily's story, though he left out the part about trying to humiliate her. Rachel remained her best friend. They studied together, ate lunch together, and Rachel often came to watch Lily's practice sessions. Sitting quietly in the corner with a book, one Saturday afternoon, Lily's mother took her to the small cemetery where her grandmother was buried. Lily brought her phone and a portable speaker. She sat by the grave and played a recording of her winter concert performance. "I got the scholarship, Abuela," she said softly when the music ended. "I'm learning so much. But everything I do, every note I play, starts with what you taught me. You gave me more than music. You gave me a voice." The wind blew gently through the trees, and Lily could almost hear her grandmother's laugh, warm and full of love. "Keep playing, Mia," she imagined her grandmother saying. "Play for joy. Play for sorrow. Play for every beautiful moment this life gives you. That's what music is for." Lily touched her grandmother's headstone, stood up, and walked back to where her mother waited by the car. She had a practice session that afternoon. And next month, she'd be performing in her first real concert with the youth program. The girl who'd been invisible, who'd been mocked and underestimated, who'd walked into Riverside Middle School expecting nothing, had found her voice. And she was going to use it to make music that would touch people's hearts. It's like her grandmother had taught her, because that's what real music does. It doesn't matter if you learn it in a palace or a tiny apartment, from an expensive teacher or a grandmother with nothing but love and memory. What matters is what you put into it. What matters is that you play with soul, and Lily Rodriguez had soul enough for a lifetime of music.